Well, welcome to the Apothecary. This apothecary was built in 1854 by Dr. Ben Davis, and to sit where it's sitting today, it didn't have to come very far. Just on the other side of the bushes behind the courthouse is where Dr. Davis's house is on Ann Street. So his apothecary was beside his house. He practiced his medicine and making medicine for about 50 years. He died in 1902, but he was married with 3 children, and he had one of his sons, George, that followed in his dad's footsteps. But we'll talk about George in just a second. But come on in and enjoy our apothecary. So we're real privileged to be able to have some of Dr. Davis's artifacts and furniture. This is Dr. Ben Davis's desk, and even some of his letters and whatnots inside this desk. We also have 2 bookcases full of medical books and legal books. And we'll talk about the legal books in just a moment, but we're really privileged to be able to have some of his artifacts. One of the things that we love here to show off is this back brace. So can you imagine walking around town, because you really couldn't be able to sit in it, that you would put your leg inside here and your whole body wraps around this contraption. It's for either a broken back or a bad back. I don't believe it was for a broken leg. Those were more for crutches. Now, do you know why we have a safe inside the apothecary? It's not for money, because we didn't have a lot of money back then, but it was for drugs. We have a lot of narcotics and opioids that he had to lock up, because the opioid addiction back then was just as bad as it is today. So he had to lock it up in the safe. Now behind us outside is our apothecary garden. And Dr. Davis would have an apothecary garden and make his own compounds and medicines. Even today, we still have some of the plants that he would have grown then that we use today in medicine. Now, I said before that George was one of the sons that followed in his dad's footsteps. George was jilted at a young age, and unfortunately he never married. He was brokenhearted, so he became a very morose person. He wore black. He was a very talkative person. He liked people, but he was a very quiet man in some ways. He was very much of a loner. The granddaughter that helped us renovate this back to its original look was her favorite uncle, and so they would sit and talk for hours and hours and hours. As a matter of fact, George would come in here in the evenings after work, and he would bring his friends over. They would have a little organ set up, and they would sing and play and debate. He loved to debate, so much so that they challenged him to go back to school to get his law degree. They didn't think he would do it. Well, in 1931, back behind you over there is certificate for law. We have artifacts in here for all different kinds of medical tools that people use. We have a table, an exam table, that's really a surgical table. It's actually metal, so you can wipe it down, and this was donated to us. We love having this, and these tables really haven't changed much over the years. Maybe a little bit more padding, but other than that, it's really pretty much the same. So we were very privileged to be able to get a lot of these items from an apothecary or a drugstore, Bell's Pharmacy, that was here in Beaufort for many years. When they retired, we were able to get a lot of their items to use as things, but people have donated so many different wonderful bottles and jars and boxes. And if you've ever seen the Antiques Roadshow, you know that boxes are the most important thing to have when you have an antique or an artifact. What is the #1 ingredient that people used to sell for an end-all be-all cure-all kind of medicine? It's alcohol. A lot of these bottles and jars are alcohol. We have Dr. DeWitt's Eclectic Remedy here, and it's 65% alcohol and 25 millimeters of ether. So you're not feeling any pain. We have one over here that's Dr. Foley's pain relief, and it is given to children on up. And that has 55% alcohol, 2 grains of ether, and 36 grains of chloroform. It'll knock you out. One of the items that I'd like you to see is over here in the corner, and these came from Bell's Pharmacy. It is prescriptions, and they're in that cylindrical shape because over the years they just kind of wore down to that shape. The one that's on display is dated 1950. So I can imagine what the date is on the very bottom of those prescriptions. It's just absolutely fabulous to have that in our shop. We would have our typewriters here that they would type their prescriptions on, and he would be able to fill them. He was a one-stop shop. He had glasses and did your eye exams. He would make up his own compounds and make his own medicines. Now this is a pill roller, which is a really kind of neat contraption. So it's got grooves on the top and grooves on the bottom, and he would make up his own dough, if you will, or paste, and put it on here and roll it until it was long cylinders. Now there's a little bit of difference in how people used it. Sometimes they would let each cylinder dry, and then they would cut it into pill shape, so it would be different strengths, if you will. Or they would just take each one, roll it in a ball, and that would be a pill. So it really depends on the type of pill it was or the medication that he was using. But I love this pill roller. One of the people that we have some of her items is Lydia Pinkham. Now Lydia Pinkham was one of the first and foremost female pharmacists back in the early 1900s. She was very, very instrumental in women's health. So we have a lot of her vegetable compounds, her vitamins. I even took her vitamins when I was a child. So Lydia Pinkham is still popular today. We have all kinds of things in the drugstore. You can find it today. So have you ever heard of the word tactile? Tactile is something that you feel. So if you get up in the middle of the night and you feel a bottle that has wording on the outside, you know not to take it. It usually has poison in it, or it is something that is not ingestible. So don't pick up anything that has a wording on the outside, but it's just really cool bottles too. One of my favorite things in this apothecary is right here on at the window, and this is called a show globe. And a show globe is usually in the window of the apothecary, and as you come into town, you look in the window before you go all the way into town. The show globe tells you whether there is a sickness in town. So it's either red or green, no other color. Now, Dr. Davis's, both of them, would barter their services, whether it's for selling their medication or for their practicing of the medicine. But they would either get eggs, they would get hens, they would get even pigs, depending on the type of service that the doctors had. I think that we have one of the most extensive displays of apothecary items in North Carolina. The kids love being on this tour. We have a lot of people that are in the medical field that love coming in this apothecary because they can just see things that they recognize, and they even teach me things on some of the medications that they see in here, or even some of the jars. Some nurses, we have nurses' hats from back in the early 1900s that they go, oh, I used to wear one of those hats. And so it is really, really popular for people in the medical field. So this is the end of this tour in the Apothecary, but I do hope that you come back and visit us many, many more times.